Hello and welcome to Clashes of the Week here on Talk Radio TV. I'm Phil Dave. Coming up.
There is a streak of cruelty through comedy, devious, delicious cruelty, and we can't legislate against that. We can't start stopping that because that is comedy.
Never been in favour of legislating against it. But look, I mean, what you deem funny and what you deem disgusting is your own business. What you choose to be offended by is your own business. But come on, it's a Holocaust joke. Since when has that been acceptable?
I suppose the thought of seeing the, quote, funny side of the Holocaust is somewhat abhorrent to most of us. But at the same time, do we really want to see comedy censored? A tough one. Plus...
So, but Mike, I'm not going to let you off on this Jimmy Savile business because
by
stirring up that kind of nonsense, the Prime Minister has to take some responsibility for aggravating.
I don't agree. Well, in that case,
you call them nutters, but yeah. I mean aggravating a series of conspiracy myths.
Yes.
And you know how.
No, but hang on. The last time you were here, you said that he wasn't wrong to say it.
It is possible that the Prime Minister's comments about Jimmy Savile weren't exactly what one would call appropriate. However, was he actually wrong with what he said? A debate that causes a bit of a ruckus between Mike Graham and chief political commentator at The Independent, John Rentoul. Also,
Petros, it's not illegal to be successful and a billionaire. Okay, maybe you should aspire to do that.
All that and more on Clashes of the Week. But first, a Netflix programme wherein the comedian Jimmy Carr made a so-called joke about the Holocaust, never thought I'd say those words in the same sentence, has been causing a bit of a debacle for several shows this week. Now, there have been calls for Jimmy Carr to be investigated by the police, and this was brought up on Christo's Counsel recently. And if you haven't seen Christo's Counsel before, it's where he invites guests with opposing views to debate a topical matter. This time around, it was Salman Shaheen, a journalist and Labour councillor for Isleworth, and Connor Tomlinson, a political commentator with Young Voices UK and head of research at the British Conservation Alliance.
I think we're discussing here the reaction against Jimmy Carr's comment, which has come from various groups like Hope Not Hate, and of course the Celebrity Big Brother contestant who was from that background. And I think rightly so, people are coming out and saying, I find this offensive, I don't find it funny. And that's not, again, I reiterate, it's not to say that there should be a law banning it, but we have every right to discuss
Connor, if unfortunately someone looks at that joke, someone fairly moronic, but there are moronic people that exist, and think, well, actually, you know what, it is fine to then show prejudice towards someone from the travelling community, or to be bigoted, or not give a job to someone and not give an opportunity, and it increases prejudice. Is there not an argument that Salman is making to say, well, look, there's no place for jokes like that in a modern society?
No, because that's not measurable. And Jimmy Carr didn't incite that. He didn't condone it. If actually you watch the rest of the special, he says the 3 reasons why that joke is good. He said, and I don't necessarily think the joke is hilarious, but he says it's poignant because it's offensive, so we're walking the line, and also it's educational, because most people don't even know about the execution of blacks, gays, homosexuals and Jehovah's Witnesses alongside Jews in the Holocaust. And he also said, we say never forget. Well, this is my way of never forgetting. I keep bringing it up and making you shocked by it so it stays present in your memory. I'd like to ask Salman, first of all, he doesn't believe there should be a law against this. Well, actually, the Blair government, which I presume that you think was a good Prime Minister, if Jimmy Carr had tweeted this joke, he would currently possibly be in prison for it under Section 127 of the Communications Act. So we actually police speech differently in person and online, thank you to Labour policy. So I hope you're going to be campaigning against that in future in your constituency. And also, what can we joke about? So we're saying ethnicity is off the table. What's the difference between gay jokes, for example, or height? You can't change your height. It's purely visual, and people get discriminated based on that. I know plenty of women who won't date blokes shorter than 6 foot. So can we make height jokes which you can't change? What is acceptable?
Well, let me answer your Labour point first. I'm not in favour of censorship, in general. And I think you can, as I've consistently said, I think you can joke about whatever you want to. But I can also say, I don't find that funny. And I think that's our right. That's free speech. And that's the contract we enter into. And when you make a joke that you think might be controversial, you're aiming it at a certain section of society that you think will find it funny. Fine, that's your right to do it. But you'll also get criticised by other sections of society. I think that's quite reasonable, in terms of a free speech contract that we have in society. Now, what I'm really getting at with the travelling community is, I as a journalist, I've visited traveller sites. I've spoken to both Roma and Irish travellers and seen firsthand the level of discrimination they face, and it's really devastating to them. And it weighs on a people's psyche if they are constantly at the butt of jokes, also at the sharp end of prejudice. And I think that's something we have to have sympathy for. Whether you choose to make jokes about it, that's your own business.
But Salman, isn't there an argument to say that we all just need to, I get fat jokes a lot on Twitter. I get gay jokes. I get all sorts. I'm not the tallest person either, and I have friends that joke with me about that, and part of it is having to develop a bit of a thicker skin. Part of it is I don't mind being the butt of the joke, and isn't just a part of the fact that what we're missing here, and it's not nice, but comedy is cruel. Comedy isn't kind. Comedy, you laughing at someone falling over. If you look at things like Laurel and Hardy, comedy is, there is a streak of cruelty through comedy, devious, delicious cruelty, and we can't legislate against that. We can't start stopping that because that is comedy.
Never been in favour of legislating against it. But look, I mean, what you deem funny and what you deem disgusting is your own business. What you choose to be offended by is your own business. But come on, it's a Holocaust joke. Since when has that been acceptable?
I don't know, Connor, when has it ever been acceptable? Aren't there some subjects that are just off limits? I mean, we do have hate speech laws in this country,
which are all wrong.
We can't. Well, no, because I don't believe that you should be able to. Maybe I'm contradicting myself, but I don't believe that I should be able to stand on a box in Trafalgar Square and calling for for gay people to be killed.
No, that's different. That's different, Christo. Hate speech laws is criminalising your intent to hate a particular group, whereas an incitement to violence, a threat, is already criminally actionable. So all you're doing is policing the thought in someone's head, saying, "Oh, it's extra worse if you hate the group of skin colour they're with, rather than you just hate."
But is it not hate? Okay, if I put a sign up in my shop to say that I don't like a certain community or I don't want to serve a certain community, would that not be considered hate speech? Is that the world you want to live in, where I can say to someone, I don't like you because you're black, or I don't like you because you're gay? Because I'm not sure I want to live in that world either.
No, I don't want to live in that world. That's why we use cultural pressure and, for example, business boycotts if they do something we don't like. The same's happening with Ben and Jerry's, for example,
I don't want to
wading
boycott
into left-wing
business.
politics, and I won't buy the ice cream.
But I don't want to wade into. I don't want a business boycott. I don't want to go to a shop and see a sign up saying no gays, because then I'd have then the onus is on me to have to go to a different shop.
Obviously, neither do I. But if the person chooses to do that, then they're going to lose out on a very large customer base. There might be lots of people will walk away, and they're going to suffer because
but they might not. There might be lots of homophobic people that then think, well, great, I want to go and shop in that shop. There might be lots of racist people that think, brilliant, I'll go to that shop because I won't encounter a black person. Isn't that the role of the state to stop that happening?
No, it's not the role of the state to stop that happening, because the state can never identify what is prejudice and what isn't. As with the fact that there's no racial protection against white people, for example. The ADL, the Anti-Defamation League in America, has changed the definition of racism in line with the BLM protests recently to say, like Salma, it's punching up, not down. So that means it's impossible to be racist
wrong.
to individuals.
That I don't support. You should be able to prejudice any race.
It is wrong. But the people who are going to set these laws are going to make that the law. So despite your compassion, Christo, and I agree with you, we shouldn't be prejudiced individually towards each other, but the state can't police this personally.
All right. Okay, I'll just let Salman respond to that then, because, it is a good point in as much as where is the line about the state intervening when it comes to thought, and secondly, some of us do have horrible thoughts. Some of us perhaps aren't nice. Some of us may want to have that sign up in our shops, and maybe we'd go out of business because of it. Isn't that just free speech taken to the nth degree?
In some ways, I would agree with Connor that the ideal should be society should regulate itself, not the government, okay? So I would much rather live in a world where people didn't think it was acceptable and the government didn't have to regulate it. But we don't live in that world. And there have been points in society when there have been extreme levels of racism that the state has had to step in. And you look, let's go back to the Holocaust. It didn't come from nowhere. It wasn't just one extremist who decided to launch a campaign of ethnic cleansing. It came about because society had considered it acceptable to be racist against Jews, to be homophobic, to be prejudiced against disabled people and against travellers. And that extremist built upon that
right.
and used it.
All right, Connor, I will give you the final word, but just to pick up on your point, there isn't always the mechanism of society to be able to reject that outright prejudice, because say I apply for a job and I've got a funny surname, Fufas, and I apply for that job, and immediately that employer says I'm going to throw that in the bin because I don't like that surname. Then I don't have a recourse to that. I can't say, well, I'm not going to shop in that business, because I'll never know that prejudice has been levelled against me. So there isn't always that natural societal recourse that would mean that laws don't need to be in place for it, is there?
One, I disagree in that if you want to have the most amount of talent, then you're going to have to expel your bigotries individually and then hire who's best for the job. And that means one business will outpace the other. They'll eclipse their customer base and they'll do better in the long term. Though I can agree with you, for example, on blind resume surveys. We take the names off, we take the gender off, etc. And then you offer the interview, and whoever shows up on the day is whoever's the most qualified. But as going back to comedy, the problem with saying you can't have this acceptable group being jokes about you can have this. Well, all jokes came from the same place. The intention to be funny. Good jokes and bad jokes. And you don't know if someone's going to be offended or laugh until the joke comes out of your mouth. So self-censorship before you even say something is going to kill
It's a really interesting debate about, as well, in a society where we want to make people laugh, where do hate speech crimes and the line sort of come in that? And I think it's a very blurred line, and I think we all agree that what is the most frustrating thing about it is the double standards, that we do seem to say, well, some communities you can joke about, some you can't, and some we get outraged about, and some we don't. And I think we all agree that that's slightly annoying and slightly moronic.
This is Clashes of the Week here on Talk Radio TV with me, Phil Dave. Now, we're often treated to a robust exchange of opinions throughout the independent republic of Mike Graham, and one of the sparkiest moments this week came from the State of Play. In the hopefully unlikely event that you haven't heard of said feature, it's the part of the show where Mike obtains the thought of a key figure on the day's news. Well, this time it was the turn of John Rentoul, chief political commentator at The Independent. Well, this was over the comments made by the Prime Minister questioning Sir Keir's attitude towards the Jimmy Savile case when Sir Keir Starmer was Director of Public Prosecution.
Let's talk about Keir Starmer from last night. I mean, I'm of the opinion that apparently, and you'll know better than me because you work down there, these people, nutters as I call them, have been hanging about around Westminster. Technical term. I mean, from whichever political persuasion they are clearly nutters. No politician should be subjected to that kind of behaviour, but it has become more and more kind of frequent now, hasn't it? Because people are very riled up. People don't like politicians. They take it out on them personally. We've seen lots of other cases of this happening before. I just don't really understand what Sir Keir Starmer was doing. If you know these people are hanging around, what's he doing going out of Portcullis House?
Well, he didn't know they were hanging around. I mean, I was there last night briefly because I arrived just beforehand, and I left just after it had happened. When I arrived, it was a very small crowd.
Right. Well, that's what I thought.
Of some very eclectic people, shall we say. Right. I mean, the first thing I noticed was a car with two St Andrew's flags sticking out of it, and a van with all sorts of homemade posters. Don't jab our kids, and something about the New World Order on it. And then
it's great, isn't it? Something about the New World Order.
I didn't.
It's all you need, isn't it? Really.
Well, and then I saw Piers Corbyn, standing outside.
Who definitely belongs in the nutter category. I'm afraid to say.
He has views that we don't agree with, Mike. Yeah.
No. He does not have views that I don't agree with. He's a nutter. I'm going to say that quite plain and simply.
It's not language I'd use, but he has unconventional views. And then I came out shortly after. All this had happened, and there were still new police vans arriving with sirens going, and there were some people shouting, and there were astonishingly few of them. I have to say.
Well, I mean, when I saw the view from above, the video as Keir Starmer was kind of getting into the police car, there's literally about 4 or 5 people.
That's right.
And you kind of go, and it's being reported like this angry mob, like thousands of people sort of chasing him down the street.
Well, you've seen the video. I mean, they were angry. They were shouting traitor mostly, but they were also shouting all sorts of other nonsense. They were asking him questions about Julian Assange, and Magna Carta. And there were you could definitely hear people talking about protecting paedophiles
Yes.
and Jimmy Savile.
Yeah.
So the Prime Minister does bear some responsibility for the kind of
I don't
nonsense.
think so. You see, that's the leap I won't make.
Thrown.
No, you see, I won't make that leap because that's ridiculous. If these people didn't have anything else to say, they would still be there. The fact that Boris Johnson mentioned Keir Starmer and Jimmy Savile in the same sentence means absolutely nothing.
And the fact that Keir Starmer just happened to be coming that way back to Parliament. He was coming from the Ministry of Defence. As I understand it, he was having a meeting at the Ministry of Defence with the shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy. So they were just walking back, and this was a protest outside the Metropolitan Police,
outside Scotland Yard,
which is next door to the MP's offices. So it's just pure chance that he happened to be coming that way.
For the security of our officials.
No, but Mike, I'm not going to let you off on this Jimmy Savile business because
last time you were in
stirring up that kind of nonsense, the Prime Minister has to take some responsibility for aggravating.
I don't agree. Well, in that case,
you call them nutters, but I mean aggravating a series of conspiracy myths.
Yes.
And you know how.
No, but hang on. The last time you were here, you said that he wasn't wrong to say it.
Yeah, well, he was.
It's not wrong.
No,
is
I
it?
said it wasn't inaccurate to say that Jimmy Savile was not prosecuted by. No, he was completely wrong to say it because it was nothing to do.
But it's not untrue, is it?
It's not untrue.
So
but that's
why
not
is he
the
wrong
point.
to say it then?
Because he was deliberately stirring this kind of nonsense about paedophilia. Which had absolutely nothing to do with the Sue Gray report, which is what he was talking about at the time.
But you've made that leap. Nobody else has. Just by mentioning.
What leap?
Well, the leap that he's somehow trying to drum up, the paedophile connection.
What had Jimmy Savile got to do with the Sue Gray report? Absolutely nothing. He mentioned it completely gratuitously as something that Keir Starmer had done when he was DPP.
Well, it's true though. And Keir Starmer was in charge of the DPP.
Yes, but what's it got to do with the Sue Gray report? Absolutely nothing.
It doesn't matter.
He was accusing Keir Starmer of prejudicing the police investigation into lockdown breaches.
Yeah.
And so he just mentioned he said
surely
the
that's
DPP
part of
shouldn't be prejudicing a police investigation. In brackets, in mentioning that he had been a DPP, he said. And while he was DPP, he prosecuted journalists.
He spent most of his time prosecuting journalists,
which is true. Jimmy Savile, as far as I know.
But it's all true. What's the problem?
Those are true facts, but they're completely unnecessary.
Well, you may say that, but
irrelevant to the point he was making.
But that's not for you to tell Boris Johnson what he can and cannot say.
Yes, it is.
Particularly in the House of Commons.
That is my job.
Particularly in the House of Commons, where you're allowed to say things that you can't say outside of the House of Commons for fear that you might be sued for libel. So, I mean, it's perfectly acceptable for Boris Johnson to say anything he wants about Keir Starmer, and I would never say to him that you shouldn't do it.
I don't.
And if for some reason he then loses his policy advisor as a result, that's down to him. That's his affair. But he wasn't wrong to do it, and you can't judge him for saying it. And you certainly can't link him to the group of nutters with old Corbyn's brother outside of Scotland Yard.
Well, you can if they were shouting about protecting paedophiles and Jimmy Savile.
It's got nothing to do with what Boris said, though. I mean,
that is what Boris said.
They were not standing outside of Scotland Yard because of what the Prime Minister said.
No, they were anti-vaxxers
in the chamber.
They were protesting against
all manner of things. I mean, why did they mention Julian Assange? I mean, you haven't made any connection to Boris Johnson there, so why would you make it about anything else that they said?
Well, because they happened to say the same thing that Boris Johnson said.
They also happened to say Julian Assange's name. They also happened to have, as you say, some saltires on a car. They also happened to have
the New World Order,
right?
And the Magna Carta. They brought that up as well.
Well, none of that was responsible.
No, but these are all conspiracy theories that Boris Johnson was deliberately feeding.
I don't agree with that
by referring to the
I
Jimmy
really
Savile
don't
case.
think so.
I think he was. No, he knew exactly what he was doing, and that was why he was advised not to do it.
No, I don't agree with that. I think that people have made that connection, which is actually worse than.
Well, one of the people who made that connection was Munira Mirza, the head of his policy unit, who resigned because she asked him not to do it, begged him not to do it.
Well, she could have resigned for a lot more reasons before that.
Asked him to apologise after he'd done it, and he refused to do it.
Why didn't she resign when he told what might be regarded by Mr. Ian Blackford as a misleading statement about not knowing about any of the parties? Why didn't she resign then? She doesn't seem to be a woman of great principle.
No, that's not true. I mean, because presumably she didn't think that the Prime Minister did anything particularly wrong.
Oh, I see. So him breaking the law, possibly, as some people are alleging, is not enough for her to resign over.
We don't know about that.
But him linking the former Director of Public Prosecutions to a case which he did not prosecute while he was Director of Public Prosecutions is a resigning matter? Give me a break.
Yeah, no, it is.
Well, that's a very odd way to operate, isn't it?
No, it's not. No, I can see exactly why she might feel strongly about that, because I think it was absolutely
yeah. You
wrong
see, I think
for the
by
Prime Minister
making
to bring that in,
but by you making the connection, that's actually encouraging these people to think there is one. Whereas if you don't make the connection,
I haven't made the connection. I am complaining about the Prime Minister making the connection.
No, but you've said that he was deliberately trying to invoke this kind of paedophile ring story, just because that's what happened in America when all those people turned up at the pizza parlour in Maryland because they thought that's where Hillary Clinton's paedophile ring was going
Precisely.
on.
Boris
But
Johnson
you're
knew
making
exactly what he was
doing.
doing.
No, he didn't. No,
yes, he did.
Really, I'm not buying that at all. I think he was.
Well,
What he was trying to say.
Why do you think he thought about it before?
Well, the reason he said it. The reason he said it was nothing to do with paedophilia. It was to do with the fact that he was pointing out that Sir Keir Starmer, while he was the Director of Public Prosecutions, was more concerned with punishing journalists because that was a political manoeuvre than he was actually going after proper criminals like Savile.
Well,
that was what I took from it.
I don't accept that, and neither does Munira Mirza.
Well, we don't care about her anymore. She's not in a job, is she? And I don't even know what she was doing there because I didn't vote for her. So good riddance, as far as I'm concerned.
A group of protesters gathered outside Great Ormond Street Hospital recently. It was over security guards' pay. James Whale not only discussed this, but witnessed it firsthand and subsequently brought it up on his show. He spoke with Petros Elia, the General Secretary of the United Voices of the World Union. Let's keep in mind that the protesters stood by the entrance of Great Ormond Street. They obstructed the entrance, making it difficult for patients and family of those patients alike to get in and out of the building, not to mention the rackets they were making as children lay sick in hospital beds not far from where they are. Here's how the conversation unfolded.
As interesting as that as it is to discuss minimum wages, the strike today was not about wages.
It was about sick pay and holiday pay and getting rights that employees get. Is that what it was?
Part of the reasons why the security guards at Great Ormond Street Hospital were taking strike action and were in fact beginning.
But what was the reason then, Petros? What was the reason?
Yeah, like I was saying, what part of the reason why they might end up having to take what will be the longest strike one of the longest strikes in the history of the NHS is the fact that they're only receiving at the moment statutory sick pay, and that's statutory sick pay in itself is bad enough, and in fact that's pretty much accepted by everybody, whatever political stripe they have, and anyone. It's particularly in a pandemic, because statutory sick pay means that when you are ill, you do not get paid a penny for the first 3 days that you're off. And what that means is that workers obviously are.
All right, we're not that stupid, Petros. We know what that means. And lots of us, I don't get sick pay.
Well, that's good to know. So
when,
do you want to hear the other reasons for the? Do you want to hear the other?
I would like you to get to it. Yeah, I would like you to get to it. Go on.
All right. So one of the reasons is, as I said, the security guards only get statutory sick pay. And it's not just that statutory sick pay is so pernicious. It's that GOSH employs 5,038 people. There are only 36 security guards. And those 36 security guards are the only people in the hospital who do not get full sick pay like the other 5,038 workers do.
And do you know why that is?
It's a choice. It's a choice to deny them full sick pay.
But it's a choice of them to take the job, isn't it?
Exactly.
They're striking.
But I also, hang on, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that is a firm, an outside firm that are contracted in to supply the security people to the NHS. Isn't that right?
GOSH has chosen to outsource them. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah,
a company
that's
called
fine.
Carlisle, which is owned by a billionaire.
Never mind about that. Petros, I only have a certain amount of time, so we. Okay, so
I thought it'd be interesting, James, for you to know that the owner of the contractor is a billionaire, Lord Ashcroft, and
Petros,
a
former
Tory party deputy chairman.
Petros, it's not illegal to be successful and a billionaire. Okay, maybe you should aspire to do that.
I didn't say that it was, James, but
Petros, if you're not going to take this seriously, we're going to fall out.
People in the NHS
you've made the point,
do not get
Petros.
even full sick pay. I thought you might find that interesting. I thought your viewers.
But that's lots of multinational companies pay people very little wages.
Couldn't care less. My thought is, if I got a job that I couldn't afford to live on, I wouldn't do the job. I'd go and find another one. Why don't they do that? And why was Jeremy Corbyn standing outside their jet today as well?
Well, James,
what have they got to do with Jeremy Corbyn?
James, you seem to be kind of ranting at me. I'm not quite sure what you're asking me here. I mean, you're asking me.
Well, if you shut up a minute, then you can hear my questions and you can answer them. I wanted to know, first of all, before you went into your tirade about billionaires, why don't these people demonstrate outside the offices of the company that employ them?
Firstly, I don't think pointing out that their boss is a billionaire was a tirade. And secondly, the reason why they're striking at the hospital, and is because it is the hospital where they work. Strikes take place at your place of work. And it is the hospital, gosh, which sets their terms and conditions. So that's the reason. That's your question.
Are you part, because there were lots of momentum flags flying there, and Jeremy Corbyn was there as well.
Flying there, actually, James.
I saw 2 or 3.
Oh well,
I think I've got a photograph of them somewhere. But
no, there may have been a couple. You said lots. You made it sound like there were far more than 2 or 3. But yeah, there probably was.
Okay. And Jeremy Corbyn was there supporting them.
Yeah, that's correct.
Do you really want to be associated with such an ignorant man, failed politician like that?
Jeremy Corbyn is a politician. He's a politician with many admirable principles, and he came down to support a very important strike in the NHS, a strike which will hopefully end soon. It won't have to continue as long as the security guards are treated fairly, are treated equally. And in fact,
well, they're not going to get any more money from you demonstrating outside the hospital. It's not going to happen.
Well, it was a strike, not a demonstration. And as I was saying, hopefully the strike won't have to continue. The only thing that will need to happen for this strike to end is if Great Ormond Street Hospital for Children chooses to treat them as equals, stops discriminating against them, and then simply treats them fairly. It's not much.
But they're not equals, are they? To, like, you know, in different jobs and different companies, there's lots of different jobs where people get different structures of how they're paid, don't they? To compare with marketplace, to compare with different markets. Like you have sales departments, and they have to compete with other sales departments, and you have people that do the cleaning, and you have to compete with other cleaners. So it's not all the same.
Yeah, that's correct, Ash. So in the NHS, there's something called Agenda for Change. Those are nationally collectively bargained contract, which every employee of the NHS, including cleaners, security guards, caterers, or porters, they will be put on this Agenda for Change contract. And they receive uniform terms and conditions. So everybody, be they a doctor, be they a nurse, be they a caterer, be they a porter, be they a cleaner, be they a security guard, employed by the NHS, will receive the same sick pay entitlement,
so it is going to happen,
entitlement, the same pensions, the same overtime entitlements, the same unsociable hours entitlements, etc., etc. So these are what the security guards are being denied. And in fact,
well, why are they being denied? Is it because it's outsourced? Is that why it's being?
Yeah, that's correct. And in fact, likewise, the cleaners were recently outsourced. They voted to strike, and as a consequence of that, they were brought in-house into the employment.
But if the hospital set the terms and conditions, they're not they're not respecting that agreement, are they? It's a loophole they've found.
No, there's no loophole. And listen, they're not. No, that's not correct. It's not that they found a loophole. And it's,
okay.
No, it's not correct.
So how are you gonna finish this? How are you going to end this? How are you going to bring this to an end? What's going to happen?
It will end when the security guards are treated fairly, are treated justly, are treated with respect, and when they get the basic rights that they have an entitlement to, that they need and that they deserve. But don't forget, James, that these security guards were the people that I presume you were applauding during the pandemic as key workers and as pandemic heroes. The same people which today...
I'm not talking about them at all. I'm not talking about this.
Human rights to strike.
Look,
just think about that for a second, James. You called for key workers and pandemic heroes to be put into prison today for exercising their human right to strike for full sick pay in a hospital in the middle of a pandemic. I wonder what your viewers would think about that.
Well, they know, because I've told them. Have you finished? Because I find you a thoroughly annoying and fairly stupid man. You've got very strong political wishes. I think you're particularly stupid. I'm going to tell you why if you listen. I walked past Great Ormond Street Hospital today, and I bumped into a woman trying to take her child who was crying into the hospital. She got very annoyed with some of your so-called, I don't know, strikers, demonstrators, whatever you want, because they wouldn't get out of her way. And they didn't try and let her through. I had a word with one who thought it was all very funny and very humorous, okay? So I think it is disgusting, And I think you as the organiser are pretty disgusting for organising that outside a children's hospital where children are very ill indeed, making such a bloody noise, and you smirk all over the TV screen and think you're so clever and funny. I would be very disappointed to see you get on much further as a union representative, and you still don't understand it, do you? A children's hospital with sick children, worried parents, you stand crowding outside the main door. You should be totally ashamed of yourself. I don't want to talk to you anymore. Goodbye. We'll take a break.
Now, let's be very clear. No one from Great Ormond Street is around to answer the claims that Petros Elia made during that particular interview. But should someone want to discuss it, they'd be very welcome to do so. However, in their absence, I do want to read out a statement that they issued in recent weeks. Great Ormond Street Hospital said that they respect and value the security team's contribution, particularly during the pandemic. They also say that they worked with an external provider approved by the Security Industry Authority to ensure a resilient and properly regulated security service, continuing that it had recently invited all members of the team to a series of staff meetings to discuss any concerns. Now, I have to tell you, I don't know if said meetings have taken place since that statement was released. Now, let's go green, shall we? Or not, as the case may be. Is the cost of going green too much for us to bear within the current scheduled timeframe for net zero? Ian Collins brought this up when he spoke with Bob Ward, Policy Director at the Grantham Research Institute on Climate Change and the Environment at the London School of Economics. Gracious me, can you imagine the size of the business cards? And Andrew Orlovsky, the Daily Telegraph business columnist. Is there really the appetite for this that was first thought there was? I'm certainly not convinced when we're possibly looking at the prospect of a reported additional £2,000 per household per year.
Well, I think the pigeons are starting to come home to roost now for not just the green agenda of the last decade, but maybe 20 years of politicians kicking the can down the road for the very basics that we rely on how to heat, how to travel and so on. And it's only going to get worse. £2,000 bills for an average household are obscene when we stand on hundreds of years of gas, clean, cheap gas. That's been demonised by Bob and his friends in the green movement. But it's only going to get worse. Quite soon you won't be able to sell your house. Your car will be taken away and you'll have a little electric toy.
Andrew, where is all this gas that you're talking about? Where is this gas?
You have a heat pump instead of a gas boiler. So I think, can I just finish, Bob? Restrain yourself a moment. People are prepared to make enormous sacrifices, like they did during World War II, like they did during a lockdown, but they're not prepared to be made fools of. And for the next 20 years, China and India are going to increase their CO2 emissions enormously. Nothing's going to stop them. No COP climate change summit is going to stop them. So we can afford to wait and bring in affordable green technologies if that's what we decide to do.
Bob, what's wrong with that?
Well, I don't know where all this magic gas is that Andrew talks about. I mean, essentially, we're pumping as much as we can from the North Sea. The only other source, and maybe Andrew can tell us what he thinks about this, is by fracking and trying to draw out shale gas, which essentially you have to shut to the ground and suck the gas out. Now, we're not currently doing that because the public said we don't want fracking rigs in our back garden if you can't tell us how much of a risk there is from things like earthquakes, which it causes. So if Andrew wants to go down that route, how is he going to persuade the public that it is worth them doing that?
Would that be the answer then, Andrew? Are you talking fracking when you referred to those huge reserves that we have?
Yeah, look, we've had 10 years of demonising fossil fuels. Just this week, the European Union declared that gas was a clean, cheap, low-carbon energy. But we've done several things. We've banned fracking when we stand on hundreds of years of clean, cheap gas. We've sold our storage, and we're disincentivising the fossil fuel producers from digging it up in the North Sea. The Americans pay a tenth of what we pay for gas, and there's a very simple reason for that. It's shale gas.
Shale gas is the answer, Bob.
Look, Andrew's living in a parallel universe, I think. we can all see that the reason our bills are going up is because the wholesale price of gas has quadrupled in the last year. That is why our bills are going up. It is our dependence on gas. We do not have enough gas through fracking to deal with all of the demand in Asia and in Europe. It's just bonkers. So even if we had fracking now and we were drawing shale gas out, it would not make any difference to the international price of gas. We'd still be paying a lot of money because you sell gas on the open market and British shale gas will be sold at the market rate, not at a massive discount to British consumers.
Tell us, Bob, on that wider issue about that phrase I used, the inevitable Armageddon. I mean, we do hear climatologists, scientists, politicians quite a lot now stand up and talk about essentially the end is nigh. They're like the old boys that used to have the sandwich boards on, explaining, if we don't change things, then we won't recognise the place. We'll have species of animals and bugs and the like, and insect life will be extinct. Sea levels will rise. You won't be able to go anywhere, do anything. The place is going to burn up because we're going to be boiling away in the most horrific manner as a planet. Is that the scene that you see, Bob Ward, when you think about our future without any of these measures in place?
Well, I can see Andrew smirking. I mean, essentially, people can see for their own eyes that climate change is already here and having an impact on us. As I said, you can see that rainfall is getting more. We're having heavier downpours, which is causing flooding. They can see that we're having stronger heat waves, which kill hundreds of people every summer. And what the scientists are very clear about, if we carry on down this route, we're going to create a climate that we have no experience of, and those risks are just bigger, where what happens is we have flooding along our coast, we have flooding in our cities and villages, we have droughts that put up the cost of food because it damages our crops. So these are real risks. They are not, it's not an Armageddon. It's actually where the scientists forecast we are going just on current trends.
Andrew Orlovsky, this is real. It's tangible. We can see it. It's happening. Why don't you believe that?
Well, any cure has to be less harmful than the disease. And Bob's citing a pathway that is completely unrealistic and is not supported by the IPCC science. What we really have to question is how a handful of people, including Bob's boss, who's a billionaire, have captured really the political class. Well, he is. That's a fact. Have captured the political class and the administrative class with such a radical anti-human agenda. But I think Bob's talked himself into a corner here because they shouted at crisis and emergency at the politicians. The politicians panicked and said, right, we're going to have heat pumps, we're going to have hydrogen. All these are substandard energy sources that make things worse. These are subpar technologies. Can I give you an example of, in 20 years' time, I'm fairly confident we'll be driving and flying with zero carbon fuel because of the new developments in synthetic fuels. Currently, synthetic fuels are really poor. We basically burn food to create something that looks like petrol. That's awful. But there are developments, if we simply wait 15 or 20 years, we'll be able to drive without any guilt and without harming the planet, according to Bob. It makes much more sense to wait than to do this economic kind of suicide that we're currently contemplating with net zero.
Yeah, so there's the urgency that many articulate, Bob, isn't quite there, I think, is part of Andrew's point. And well, particularly when China and others are burning the place up, we might as well spend that time, those intervening years, cracking on with new innovations.
No, Andrew's argument is that the risks don't exist and he doesn't believe the scientists. Well, the public can see the risks are there in front of their eyes. They can see the direction of travel, so they accept what the scientists say. And as we can, Andrew, again, completely denying, hasn't yet admitted that our bills have gone up because of our dependence on gas. People can see that the price of petrol is going up for the same reason. We're dependent on fossil fuels. It's a finite resource and the price is volatile. So not only is burning fossil fuels making our lives more difficult through climate change and air pollution, it's also incredibly expensive in putting the cost of living up. What's the point?
What is the point, Andrew?
The point of burning fossil fuels, the point of cheap energy. I'm not quite sure what Bob's point was.
Cheap?
It was lost in one of his rants.
Where have you been? It's not cheap. Our bills are going up because of fossil fuels.
Yeah, our bills are going up largely because Greens like you have demonised fossil fuels.
Oh, don't be
I think
daft.
we've been over
It's
that, and
because of
you're
supply
now
and
repeating
demand.
it.
It's
Can I quote from Bob's boss, the billionaire Jeremy
ridiculous.
Grantham?
My
I
boss
find this
is
a fascinating character. He said.
Sorry, I appreciate Bob's boss isn't here right now. Who is Bob's boss?
Bob's boss is a billionaire hedge fund backer. He's
no, it isn't. That's completely, utterly untrue. That's a lie.
Okay. Well, in fairness, in fairness, Andrew, your boss is a billionaire as well, but that's another story. But let's.
It's not my boss.
Let's
my
just.
Boss is the director of the Grantham Research Institute.
Okay. Well, explain the views that you are challenging, Andrew, in Bob's world, be that of his or his bosses.
Capitalism and business are going to have to remodel themselves. When you read what Jeremy Grantham has actually said, and there are just a handful of billionaires driving this agenda, it's like sitting next to Rick from the Young Ones on the bus. I think any normal person would just steer themselves away from it. These are cranks, and I'm fascinated how a handful of cranks have captured the political class. I think we can do something about politicians, because I don't think heat pumps will survive one by-election. They're a terrible technology. I don't think hydrogen costs will survive many more by-elections. But getting the civil service to think about people rather than these sorts of meaningless targets is the real challenge we have ahead of us. And Bob says I'm an evil person because I'm advocating cheap energy and I'm not trying to destroy the economy. But the fact is, what we do in the UK doesn't make a blind bit of difference to the climate. If you were serious about it, then China and India would reverse their policies, and they would, but they're not going to. So what we do for the next 20 years really doesn't matter.
Hello, this is Clashes of the Week here on Talk Radio TV with me, Phil Dave. Still to come.
I disagree. I think the club...
That's your right to disagree.
It
I
is.
don't think you're right.
Well, you're wrong, though, aren't you?
Right, Mike.
You are
no,
wrong.
I'm not wrong. You're wrong. You're completely wrong. You've got no answer for it. You want to penalise the club for someone else.
I don't want to penalise the club. I want to... No, I want...
On your radio station called Habit, would you take the blame for it?
What?
No, of course you wouldn't. You just wouldn't have it.
No, but if somebody on my radio station was filmed and kicking a cat and it went viral, I would want the management to kick him out.
On the week that we learned that Kurt Zouma can't tell the difference between a cat and a football, surely no one is going to defend the actions of the West Ham player, are they?
I think that's one of the things we're going to need to look at. I mean, I think, Julia, with the greatest of respect, it's very easy with hindsight to say that actually we made some wrong decisions. But
why do you need hindsight to say that if you decide to stop cancer treatment for a 30-year-old, that's going to be a bad outcome?
So let me just cycle back to the beginning.
The NHS have arguably made some very strange decisions throughout the pandemic, and yes, I know they were under immense pressure. However, it doesn't mean that we can't question it. Well, that's certainly what Julia Hartley-Brewer does, thank goodness. All that and more on Clashes of the Week. But first, let's be honest, there are so many subjects that are the cause of friction in this day and age, whether it be the antics in Westminster, the cost of energy, illegal immigration. There are all sorts of points to disagree over. And that is certainly what happened recently on Drive Time when Jeremy Kyle asked his political panel, in the form of Laurie McFarlane, contributing editor at Open Democracy, and Conservative commentator Emma Webb.
Can we cut straight to the big news story of the day? Let's not talk about energy bills for a tick. You just saw Rishi Sunak's performance there. People split as ever. Quite interesting. Comments like, as long as I'm doing this job. His comment about Boris Johnson's apology about the Jimmy Savile slur, he said, well, he's clarified his comments. Peter Carr saying to me that this is really the first time somebody inside the cabinet has taken a slightly different route, and what Cardi P thinks is that in 6 months, if there's a leadership election, he can look back and say, actually, I made the point that I didn't agree with that. But both of you would agree that Munira Mirza, who's been with Boris Johnson for 14 years, to lose your head of policy, is that the dam breaker? Is this the beginning of the end? Laurie McFarlane, what do you think?
I think it's certainly a damning blow, and it was very clear from Rishi Sunak's performance today that he is pretty uncomfortable, I think, with some of the stuff Boris Johnson's been doing. He's an ambitious politician. He probably has his eye on the high office one day himself. And so I think you can definitely tell that people around Boris Johnson, his advisors, his chancellor, are sort of starting to think, are we hitched ourselves to a sinking ship here? And you can't really blame them for that.
What about you, Emma?
I think it's quite clear that Rishi is positioning himself. You know, he's a very strategic man, and I think Peter alluded to this as well, which is that, you know, he's an extremely ambitious and very intelligent individual. I think, as you pointed out there, the language he uses is very important. He clearly is positioning himself to take over the leadership, and he's done that, you know, for the long haul for many months now. Has managed to get himself on the right side of most fences. Many people don't actually know exactly what Rishi stands for, because he's been very good at keeping his cards close to his chest in comparison to other leadership candidates. And as you say, you know, this resignation of Munira Mirza, I've got my ear pretty close to the ground, and I was extremely shocked by this. It's a huge announcement. Munira Mirza also someone, you know, at the heart of Number 10's policy unit. She, as you say, she's been with Boris for many years, and she's an extremely sound individual. She's been particularly good on issues surrounding the culture wars. She's just a very sound person overall, and this is a real loss to Boris Johnson. It's a real loss to Downing Street, and I'm actually quite taken aback by it.
Let's talk about the support package announced. Energy price hike today. We've been talking about it for weeks, but they're saying the average household's bill will go up by £693. Rishi jumps up and says, I'm going to give £350 to households. That's still a net loss of £343, even by my maths. I made the point, I'm not an intelligent person, but I don't know why the government doesn't deal with these companies that make all this money and cut the middleman, which is the customer, the paying victim, out. This is interesting for both of you, from Andy. When Boris Johnson said he wanted us to get to net zero, I didn't realise he meant my wage after expenses. Laurie McFarlane.
Yeah, I mean, the economic outlook for households at the moment is pretty scary. Not only we've got the energy bills going up 50+%, we've got tax rises, interest rate rises, we've had cuts to universal credit. And I think giving people this £200 rebate, which they have to pay back, is really not even going to touch the sides, really. And so I think, you know, the government does need to do more. There is another announcement, though, I think we should focus on, which is related today, which is one of your callers mentioned. Shell today announced that their profits are increased 14-fold to 200 billion due to the very
12 trillion, not 200, 12 trillion, isn't it? Isn't it something ridiculous?
Due to the very soaring gas prices, which is causing the squeeze on households. So I think the time has come to talk about a windfall tax on the fossil fuel companies, which would then fund some serious financial support to households that are in need.
I'm not as intelligent as any of you, right? I don't understand how Shell can make that money and people are struggling to heat their homes. Make those companies pay. I don't understand that, and that's just me, Emma. How does that make any sense to your average man and woman listening to this show in the United Kingdom right now? That's stupid.
Well, I'm afraid I'm not an economist, so I'm actually not literate enough to be able to understand the ins and outs of this, particularly because economics has so much to do with behavioural science as well, and the way that people behave in response to these sorts of measures. But I think one of your listeners made a good point there, which is that what difference does it make if the government intervenes to try and help people pay for the rises in energy costs if you end up losing your house because you can't pay your mortgage? Peter Cardwell was absolutely right when he said, you know, this is help good, you know, could help save us, but who's got anything to save at the moment? The majority of people around the country who are struggling to pay their mortgages for reasons to do with government public health policies, you know, not COVID itself, but the decisions that the government has made. We only saw today the news that suggestion that actually lockdowns may have done more harm than good. I think many people faced with these rises in the cost of living are going to feel as if the government, you know, gives with one hand and takes away with the other. Because actually the result of this for the individual's pocket, it doesn't seem as if it's going to have that much of an impact overall.
It's interesting as well. Listen to this. This is interesting. Robert says, Munira Mirza leaving is a disaster, but your panel exclude her replacement. This is Andrew Griffiths, with the youngest ever FTSE 100 finance director as a backbencher. I know who I would rather have. He's a fabulous appointment, will do the job very impressively. That's an opinion. I rather like this message, actually, which I am going to read. People were very happy when Boris and Rishi were putting them on furlough. Now they want their money back. Surely we could all see that coming, says Pete in Sheffield. It's interesting, isn't it, Laurie?
Well, I mean, I don't necessarily think that, you know, we should be comparing the two. I mean, it's very clear that the cost of the furlough scheme, yes, it was high, but the cost of not having the furlough scheme much higher, because now we've actually kept a lid on unemployment. Unemployment is quite low. Had we not had the furlough, we could be seeing high double-digit unemployment, combined with the Bank of England saying today 7% inflation this year. It would have been a big crisis. And so I think that was the right decision at that time. Now we've seen a whole bunch of other things, energy prices, supply chain shocks, various other things coming to bear fruit. And yes, there are difficult decisions to be made. But, when you look at the big picture, as you said, when you look at what's happening with Shell aren't the only ones, various others. The question is, who should bear the cost? And I think we need to have a discussion about what is fair and what is right. And I think the idea of a £200 loan to households that they need to pay back is completely disproportionate to what we're facing at the moment.
I just wonder sometimes that Boris Johnson wakes up in the morning and thinks, I spent all my life wanting this job, and then the pandemic came and the energy, everything's a disaster.
Now, the subject of Jimmy Carr's so-called Holocaust joke caused a stir for more than one programme this week on the home of common sense. If you missed it, you will find examples of said attempt at humour on our Twitter page at Talk Radio. Ian Collins spoke about it with comedian and political activist Kate Smurthwaite and comedian Luke Stephen. Now, they say that comedy is subjective. Or might I observe that clearly Kate and Luke have a very different sense of humour.
Kate, firstly, was Jimmy Carr wrong to use this material?
I mean, this is really, really horrible stuff, isn't it? It doesn't seem like a joke to me. It just seems like a really horrible thing to say, suggesting that an element of the Holocaust, which killed thousands and thousands of people, was in some way justified or indeed good. I mean, how utterly nauseating. And yes, he's always been an edgy comedian, and he said lots of things over the years that I sure wouldn't put in my show, and I probably wouldn't put on my channel if I ran a channel. But to me, this is just, and it comes at a time when the PCSC bill is already criminalising members of the Gypsy, Roma and Traveller communities and making their lives incredibly difficult. They're a community that has been discriminated against since the Holocaust and well before that, and continues to be discriminated against now. I think that it's clear that this is not the right line. It's not that there's a question of, there are all sorts of things which we would not want on air. There's no magic line that we can all agree on. We just have to be part of an ongoing conversation about what's okay and what isn't. And to me, I can't believe that this is the bit that's up for debate. Like, this obviously isn't. There are other things which we could discuss. No one will ever agree 100% on the line. But this is so far the other side of the line that, it's not a joke. It's just a nauseating piece of hate speech.
Luke Stephen, it's not a joke. There's no debate here.
Yeah, I'm astounded. To be quite honest with you, it's clearly a joke. He's not saying anything positive happened in the Holocaust. It's a classic Jimmy Carr joke.
That's exactly what he says.
I didn't interrupt you, Kate. Let me finish what I'm saying. It's a joke about misdirection.
I didn't say anything obnoxious.
No, Kate, please, come on. Let's have a grown-up debate here. It was a clear joke about misdirection. It's a clear joke about misdirection.
What's a grown-up debate about a man justifying somebody's...
Kate, let's just hear...
You're having a laugh.
Let's just hear Luke...
Let me get my point out.
Let's hear what Luke says on this, and we'll come back to you, Kate.
It's a clear joke about misdirection. He sets up a joke about the Holocaust, which we all know is terrible. He then says, but we forget about the thousands of gypsies that were killed in the Holocaust. We also know that's terrible. He then says, because no one ever wants to talk about the positives, it's a joke about misdirection. The audience are laughing ironically, and we know that's not a funny thing for us to be laughing at. It's about context and where he's doing it. He's doing it in a stand-up show, and a show called Dark Material. He isn't doing it at a Nazi rally.
So, Luke, who is the target of the joke, Luke? Because I often think, comedy, to me, certainly as an observer and as a fan, and lots of mates and people I know do comedy, it's about where it comes from and what the target is. So in this case, I think we can all agree that Jimmy Carr's probably not a mad racist or anti-Semite. But who's the target of that line?
Target of the joke is the audience for they're not being aware about the deaths of gypsies and homosexuals and Jehovah's Witnesses, which he also says in the bit. Also, I was on Twitter, the bit you've tagged us in from his show, Jimmy Carr does a joke about incest. But none of us here, we're not debating going, this is absolutely disgusting. This could trigger people who have been abused by their fathers, because we know he's telling jokes. So why are we selecting this bit? It is a false narrative here we are putting across.
It's a false. Okay,
we are pretending that we are offended by something. We're pretending we don't know he's joking.
I mean, Kate, I said at the beginning in my intro, you probably didn't hear the very beginning of this, that actually the target was that he was those who mock or just don't care about gypsies. The target is the almost ritual omission of gypsies in the story of the Holocaust.
But you can't joke about people who have horrendously negative attitudes towards members of the GRT community by joining in. I mean, that doesn't work like that. If he was to make a joke about people who have failed to understand the breadth of the Holocaust, okay. If he was making a joke about how history books don't cover this stuff as much as they should, great. If he was making a joke about the widespread bigotry in our society, or all of those things,
that was his joke. That's exactly what he did.
No, he's
That's exactly
not,
what he did.
He's not. Listen to the actual words he said. He's just reciting straightforward hate speech, you know. And when I heard it, I thought I better go and look at the context, because maybe he's saying this is something that's really obnoxious that I don't agree with, and you know, here's where I heard it and here's why I'm criticizing it. But he doesn't. He just says it, and the audience laugh along. And I mean, I've been discussing this all morning on the TV and yesterday on Sky News as well. And my Twitter timeline is absolutely loaded with people saying, too right, I also hate those communities. This is not... Nobody, do you know what I mean? The people who already have those horrendous attitudes are not going, oh, we've been ridiculed here. They're going, exactly, finally somebody who agrees with it.
That's obviously
and that
terrible.
tells us that it hasn't worked as a joke. It's worked as a piece of hate speech. It's fired up the general population.
We know it worked as a joke.
Levels at a time when this community is being
God.
by the current legislation.
Let's get another response in from Luke.
We know it worked as a joke, as he did it in a theatre in front of thousands of people, and he got a huge laugh and a round of applause.
Yeah,
Jimmy
I don't
Carr
want to
is
surprise
guilty
you
of doing
here,
a joke that worked.
Hitler said quite a lot of stuff in theatres.
Oh yeah, to laughter, didn't he, Adolf Hitler? There is no one in that audience who's going, "Thank God, Jimmy Carr has finally said what we're all thinking." That was Adolf Hitler was not a stand-up comedian. Adolf Hitler was not a stand-up comedian.
There are people all over my Twitter feed saying exactly that. So, you know, if it was a joke...
Oh, okay, all right, okay, so he meant it then. That's a good point. Because there's hatred on your Twitter line. Jimmy Carr's a racist, and he actually meant every word he said. Brilliant argument. What are you saying? What are you saying?
What I'm saying is that if he didn't mean it that way, then surely he would have come out immediately and said, I'm so sorry, that joke...
So you think he did mean it that way?
It wasn't what I was saying, but he didn't. Last night he was on stage saying, I'm going down swinging, I don't repent of a thing, and yes, there's going to be Holocaust jokes, strap in. That's not the sound of somebody...
But Kate, would you recognise, Kate, Luke raised the point earlier, Kate, that in Jimmy's routine, other parts, he talks about incest. Nobody thinks objectively that is funny either, but comedians find a way to get into all sorts of uncomfortable territory, right?
Ian, I don't think there's a subject you can't talk about in comedy. I don't think that you can't do jokes about minority communities, and I don't think that you can't do jokes about the Holocaust. The question is, what joke are you doing? Are you doing a joke that sends up, people who don't take it seriously? Are you doing a joke that sends up those people who are not interested in getting justice, and those people who are still bigoted despite years and years of it being explained to them how very, very wrong and offensive they are? Of course, and I know many comedians who talk on stage about really serious subjects like sexual assault and things like that, but they're not poking fun at victims of sexual assault. They're poking fun at the police's failure to prosecute.
So do you think Jimmy Carr...
failure to sort these problems out?
When I said to Luke, who was the target on this, he identified who he thought that was. Who do you think was the target of that routine?
This inverted commas joke, and I use the very heavy bunny ears, is members of the Gypsy, Roma and Traveller community. There's no other... You can't do a joke about wishing saying you're glad a group of people were brutally
He's not
murdered
glad
in a
they
genocide.
died, though. Why are you pretending he's glad that they died?
And then say
you
that
know he's not glad about
people
that.
you've mentioned aren't
Luke?
the targets of it. Of course they are.
This is such a false argument. You know full well Jimmy Carr is not glad that thousands of gypsies died in the Holocaust. You know he's not glad about that. You know it's a joke about misdirection. You know it's a joke about misdirection. You know he misleads the audience, and you know he hits them with a joke that pulls them back and they go, oh God, but that's not what we expected. You know it's a joke. You know it's a setup.
He doesn't twist it round and say, I didn't mean that. There's another way of
You know he doesn't mean it because he's doing it at a stand-up comedy show in a show called Dark Material. You notice he would have been touring this joke for over a year as well.
Someone doesn't mean that you can do it. If I come around your house and say, hey, I'm wearing a T-shirt that says might stab someone, it's not your fault when I stab you. You can't just warn someone.
How is that even remotely comparable to you coming to around my house? How is that remotely comparable? You coming around my house and stabbing me and someone seeing a Jimmy Carr show? That's not even remotely comparable. It's one of the worst arguments I've ever heard. Jimmy Carr's joke is comparable to you coming to my house in a T-shirt and stabbing me. Are you having a laugh? What on earth are you talking about?
They're being criminalised right now because of the prevalence of these attitudes in our society.
Listen, I step in for no other reason than time, but Kate Smurthwaite, Luke Stephen, thank you, both comedians and writers with very different views there.
Now, time to put you back in the spotlight. Mike Graham opened up the phone lines as usual, and this time it was on the subject of a certain Kurt Zouma, aka the cretinous cat kicker. That sounded much easier to say in my mind. Surely no one in their right mind would defend such callous act of a clearly flawed mind, would they?
Hiya, Mike.
How you doing, sir?
I'm good. I'm a long-time listener.
Good man.
I absolutely love your show.
Thank you.
And I'm a complete and utter cat lover from day one.
Super. But?
Here we go. This thing with Zouma, I am sick to death of hearing you bleating on about.
Are you?
I am absolutely sick of it. I mean, I totally agree with you what he done. Right. I mean, if I bumped into him, I'd like to give him a kick.
Would you?
But you're just going on about him like he's the worst person. You would have think he'd murdered someone. I mean, I don't hear you once mention the Man United guy who beat his girlfriend up.
Well, that's because there's a police action. No, well, that's because there's a police action going on there. I can't talk about that.
So, it's still on video. You said this guy hasn't been prosecuted. But
no, but it's a different. It's a different. No, but there's a different situation when somebody's being investigated by the police, right? In what is considered to be a serious crime, right? You can't actually talk about it by law. That's part of the reason why we don't do that.
But there's plenty of other footballers that brought the game into disrepute apart from this guy.
They have, but not this week, Mick.
Yeah, but to penalise the whole team is ridiculous. And all the fans who've watched it and played all over the years, the club, and all, I couldn't give two monkeys about the sponsors because we don't spend anything anyways. It's a waste of time. All the sponsors can go as far as I care.
Okay.
But you shouldn't be penalising the team because of one stupid idiot.
Well, how is it penalising? Hang on, how is it penalising the team for him to be fired?
Well, because he's one of our best players.
Is he?
So you can't penalise the team.
So what would it have to take for him to do for you to agree that he should be let go?
You can't. Why would you let him go? There is no reason.
So there is no circumstance under which you would like him to leave.
No, none at all.
So what if he ran somebody? So if he ran somebody over in his car and killed him, you'd be quite.
Then he attacked the player. What about Cantona when he jumped in the crowd and attacked the player?
He was banned from playing. He was banned from playing.
Yeah, I know he was banned, but he wasn't kicked out of the country. He wasn't kicked out of Man United. And you're telling me that's on par with a bloke kicking a cat?
Well, I think that if you kick a defenceless animal, in Cantona's case, he kicked a football hooligan, which I was all in favour of actually at the time. To be honest, I would have given him an MBE. I would have given him an MBE for that. Plus, he's a Palace fan as well. You should be happy about that. The point is this, right? If you kick a defenceless animal, I think that's a lot worse. It's a lot worse.
I agree with you, but I don't think it's a reason to ban someone to take his whole living away from him.
Oh, come on, his whole living. This guy's a multi-millionaire. He doesn't have to work again.
Well, how much money do you have to have before? You're always going on about this council culture and all the rest of it. It's all not allowed to take their career.
I don't actually go on about council culture much.
I've heard it loads of times. You've said about it. Well, not all the time. Then I apologise. You say it often. But
listen, you're getting very worked up, Mick. You're getting very worked up.
I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it always going on about this guy. Yeah, he's a wrong 'un.
Yeah, he is a wrong 'un. So why do you want a wrong un playing for... Yeah, but hang on, Mick. Why do you want a wrong un? Why do you want a wrong un, as you've just called him, playing for your football team? Isn't that a bit embarrassing?
I'll tell you exactly why, Mike. I'll tell you exactly why. Do you know why our national football team is so rubbish and we never win anything? It's because all you want is goody little two-shoes boys playing for us. That's what you want. I want some bad boys in there. I want some people who pick up some trouble. I want someone who can play. I don't care what he's done, like Paul Gascoigne. I don't give a monkey's. I want people who can play.
Paul Gascoigne never kicked a cat, as far as I remember.
No, I know. So exactly what I'm saying. I don't care about it. You know what I mean? I want people who do it. He should be fined a maximum. Fine him £1 million. Did
you hear what Scott Minto said the other day?
Oh, he's another one. All these ex-players.
He's an ex-player. He's a West Ham player, man.
Yeah, I know he was. Listen to Dean Ashton. Did you hear what he was saying about it? He's another one.
What's wrong with Dean Ashton?
They were never any good when they was there after them, but they can still come out. And who's got David
nice.
Seaman's wife talking about it today, haven't you?
Yeah, we're going to do that just soon, actually. But only 8 more minutes, you can hear what she's got.
Around there, you can ask. There's bound to be a cleaner at West Ham. You can go and ask him what he thinks. If you're getting his wife on
I'll tell you what, I'd quite like to hear from Karen Brady, actually, Mick. She's not shy coming forward.
Absolutely.
But why hasn't she come out? All right, hang on. Why hasn't she come out representing people like you, right, to say what you're saying? I'll tell you why. Because she knows that she would get slaughtered for that.
I know, it's like Ronnie and Reggie. Why aren't they out here doing something? They're sitting in there hiding behind the doors. They should be saying something, sticking up for the team.
Yeah,
but they're not.
But don't you think,
Mick,
one final question to you. Don't you think that David Moyes was hung out to dry when he was given when he said this guy's going to play for us, right? Yep. That should never have been allowed. And so the management and the owners of the football club were in the wrong.
Yeah, but do you know why? Because the team, the Ronnie and Reggie who run the club, they don't put any money into the club at all. So he didn't have any option of players. We have not got a second team. Not our old Man United. They've got 30, 40 players that can play. We have got one team and that's it. The boys had to play the best team he's got. And that Bronco...
Yeah, but when the best team... Yeah, but if, for example, Zouma was injured, right, he wouldn't have played him, would he?
If he was injured, but he wasn't injured.
No, he wasn't injured. No, hang on. But he shouldn't have been available to play, is my point. Should he?
Well, no, I disagree with that.
Well, then you just... hang on.
No, the team shouldn't be penalised, or the club shouldn't be penalised because of one plump.
I disagree. I think the club...
That's your right to disagree. I don't think you're right.
Well, you're wrong, though, aren't you?
Right, Mike.
You are wrong.
No, I'm not wrong. You're wrong. You're completely wrong. You've got no answer for it. You want to penalise the club for someone else.
I don't want to penalise the club. I want to... No, I want...
on your radio station called Habit, would you take the blame for it?
What?
No, of course you wouldn't. You just wouldn't have it.
No, but if somebody on my radio station was filmed and kicking a cat and it went viral, I would want the management to kick him out. How about that?
Yeah, but you want his whole career ruined because he's done something stupid, kicking a cat.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying ruin the guy's career. I'm just saying kick him out of the Premier League. He can go back.
That's what you were saying.
No, I said no.
The Premier League.
I never said that.
Just saying, kick him out of the Premier League.
So the Premier League's the only league in the world, is it, Mick?
No, but it's the best.
It isn't actually.
It is the best. There's no doubt about it.
It's full of wrong-uns, Mick. It's full of wrong-uns. You said it yourself.
Last night, whole of America is glued to the TV every time Premiership's on.
It's not actually. No, you're wrong. You're wrong. The biggest sport in America is not the Premier League. Mick, are you going to tell me? All right, okay. Let me ask you a question. Who watches more sport in America? Is the Super Bowl the biggest sporting event in the world or not?
Oh, but we're talking about football, yeah?
No, you said everyone in America is glued to the football. They're not. They're watching the NFL, mate.
No, who watch the football are glued to the Premiership. They don't watch the Chinese
League. I know you're changing. It's not called the Premiership. It's called the Premier League.
We're going to play semantics now, are we?
Well, I mean, if you want to be right all the time, Mick, you've got to get the statement right.
I'm just saying, no, you've got to stop changing the question, mate, to fit your narrative.
Why?
Like I said, the football, people watch the Premiership. They don't go and watch
the Premier League.
That's something else.
It's the Premier League, Mick.
Oh, the Premiership, yeah, the Premier League.
It's not called the Premiership.
Oh, whatever you like. See, we're playing games now.
We're not playing games. I'm just trying. I just want you to be accurate.
You're losing the argument. You're changing the argument.
I'm not changing. I just want you to stop changing the name of the organisation.
I made a little mistake making the number where I said it 10 times. Now I've got it right. I've got it wrong.
No, you got it wrong 4 times actually.
Oh, right. Is that right, mate? Yeah. Okay, then.
Anyway, listen, I'm looking forward to what you think of what David Seaman's wife has to say about it, because that's coming up shortly.
I'm not interested. What am I interested in? Someone's wife. Why would I be interested? Like I said, get down to the
sexist.
Cleaner.
It's a bit sexist.
Give you a good idea of what's going on, wouldn't he?
What's wrong with David Seaman's wife?
Because she's not a footballer. Why would you?
Oh, what? So she's not allowed to have a view on somebody kicking a cat because she's not a footballer?
Okay.
Hey, come on, Mick! For heaven's sake, get back in your box, mate. Get back in your box.
Seaman's wife on there. If it weren't for that,
because she's interested in cat charities. Actually,
rubbish, mate. You wouldn't have her on there otherwise. Because it's David Seaman's wife who's got her on there.
Well, no, she's
interested otherwise.
Well, she runs a cat's charity.
The argument, Mike. You're playing games. You lost the argument.
How have I lost the argument? Your sponsors are dropping like flies, mate. You're going to have even less money next season.
It doesn't matter.
And when you get in the Champions League, you're going to last about 2.5 nanoseconds.
It doesn't matter to me, the sponsors. Like I said, our club don't use the money from the sponsors for anything anyway.
Right,
so it doesn't matter to any of the West Ham fans.
You don't care who plays for the club as long as they're good, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You don't care. You don't like the owners of the club because they don't spend any money. You don't care about the sponsors of the club, even though you haven't got any money. It's a very weird position to hold, Mick.
Well, like I said, I've been a West Ham fan for over 40 years, mate.
Well, no wonder you're so grumpy.
That's why they want him out. That's why they want GP out. They want the two managers out because they don't spend more money on the club. We're fed up with it.
I see. All right. Well, listen, Mick, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Do continue to listen because you never know. You might learn something.
This is Talk Radio TV's Clashes of the Week with me, Phil Dave. Now, 6 million plus people are waiting for routine operations on the NHS. Sajid Javid said when he took over the job of Health Secretary last year, the number would most likely reach around 13 million. Well, the Health Secretary did lay out his plans this week for how the department plans to deal with the ever-growing backlog of patients. Chris Hobson is the Chief Executive of NHS Providers, an NHS Trust members organisation that bridges the gap between trusts and the Department of Health. He spoke with Julia Hartley-Brewer.
And the other thing, we talk about these phrases like routine surgery. To a heart surgeon, quadruple bypass is routine. Ain't routine to the patient and their families. Elective surgery, again, it's not elective in the sense of, I think I'll just choose to have an operation. It's not having a boob job, is it? We are talking about people having surgery that is life-changing and sorting out pain they've often suffered for many years, knees, hips, or losing their eyesight. We are talking about often very serious treatments that people are waiting not just months, but sometimes years for. So talk us through. If it was up to you right now, from what you've spoken to the NHS Trust, you've spoken to the doctors, you've spoken to the government, what would you do right now to start clearing that backlog?
Well, we're actually going really rather fast at kind of clearing that backlog. And interestingly, we're very proud. Trusts are very proud of the work they've done over the last few months to ensure that at a point when they were very, very busy, they actually were continuing with backlog clearance at a much higher rate than they were expecting. So look, Julie, there's no single bullet here. There's about 6 or 7 different things that we need to do. We need to expand capacity. We need to ensure that trusts work together effectively so that, for example, 3 neighbouring trusts with short travel time distances can have a single list so that if there is spare capacity in one for cataracts and another one is full up, you can move to the one that is less full. We know that we need to help people to wait well. So we know that we need to give them the information about how long they are going to be waiting. And as you heard yesterday, the My Planned Care platform will give advice to people because a third of people who don't attend are due to the fact that they've got conditions such as high blood pressure and diabetes that aren't perhaps being managed as well as they could do in the run up to. We know that we need to expand our community diagnostic facilities. We know that we need to create surgical hubs where effectively you can concentrate on a particular procedure, get everybody really expert at doing that at pace, and then put those put those procedures.
Why has this? That's the thing, is that these all sound like great ideas. How come no one thought about it not just 2 years ago, but 10 years ago?
Well, some of this is what we were doing the last time that we had to clear waiting lists under the Blair Brown era. But what we're doing this time is the problem has really particularly arisen because of COVID. So it's inevitably it's a problem that's we've had to focus on over the last sort of 6-12 months, and we have now got that plan in place. The reason why the plan is important is the Treasury won't release the money, in particular the capital, but also the 2023 revenue allocations to pay for things like overtime that we know we need to get through these cases. So the issue as to why we can't delay any longer, and we really need that plan quickly, is our trusts need to know where's that capital going to go so that they can create the extra capacity that's needed. But the plan is there. And as I said, our trust leaders have made a big effort working with national leaders in the Department of Health and Social Care to create what they think is a really good plan. And they know they've got to get a move on with this. They're raring to go.
I mean, they really do. And again, as we know, a lot more of the treatments, they start off routine. They become emergencies because people are further down the track. I mean, dealing with someone who's got stage 1 cancer, dealing with someone with stage 4 cancer, very, very different treatments. In my personal experience, and I mentioned this on the show yesterday, my personal experience, my family's experience, and bearing in mind, I'm the daughter of a GP, I'm the sister-in-law of a nurse. My father at one point was special advisor in the Department of Health under a Labour Secretary of State for Health, so back in the 70s. So we've got quite a lot of experience between us, old and young, from the healthcare. Is that a lot of the problems happening in hospitals are not down to, I'm not accusing staff of being lazy or hopeless, and I think, lots of staff on the front line are working very hard, but there is a big problem with the bureaucracy of the NHS. A huge number of people are employed in it, and a lot of it is very inefficient. Paperwork not being shared, the fact that the NHS was still using fax machines, all of this, that actually things are gradually improving. But for instance, my husband getting an email about, a letter about an operation that arrives, after the date that's supposed to have happened, not getting an email or a text, even though they've got that information. The NHS in lots of occasions can be kind of 19th century, not 21st century. We need to sort that stuff out, don't we?
Yeah, I think it's a perfectly fair cop, Julia, to argue that the NHS is behind not only the private sector, but many other public services in relation to its use of digital, particularly in its use of digital in relation to patient-facing services. So, for example, just 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was renewing my tax disc online. I paid my council tax online. So, yeah, I mean, it's quite right. The NHS does need to get into the 21st century in terms of using digital. And that is one of the things that we're really focusing on. I hate to say this, Julia, at the risk of incurring your wrath, but part of the problem has been we've not had the investment.
Yeah, I accept that.
To basically enable us to do that digital transformation. I used to work at HMRC, where I ran HMRC's online services. The reason as to why we were able to put self-assessment online is because we made a proper investment in the technology in a way that we've not been able to do with the NHS. So yes, completely agree. Well,
we spent the money on people's COVID apps and things. Maybe we could make sure we could have people's cancer and heart attack apps as well. I mean, just finally though, you did say that because of COVID we've got this backlog. There were backlogs before, and they were growing long before we had COVID because of a lack of, again, funding has gone up for the NHS, but not by up as much as the extra need has gone up with people getting older and those extra costs over the last few years. But also, there was a decision in this country by NHS trust leaders, by the NHS, the government, to basically shut down, to all intents and purposes, most other caring services. There are many, many people I've spoken to who work in different fields other than dealing with people on the COVID wards, where they basically sat and twiddled their fingers. We did not use the private sector, which was available, having been purchased for billions of pounds. We only used a third of that, even at the height of COVID. There were different decisions that could have been made by NHS management, which would not have led to such a backlog. Do you accept that?
I think that's one of the things we're going to need to look at. I mean, I think, Julia, with the greatest of respect, it's very easy with hindsight to say that actually we made some wrong decisions. But
why do you need hindsight to say that if you decide to stop cancer treatment for a 30-year-old, that's going to be a bad outcome?
So let me just cycle back to the beginning. If you remember, right at the beginning, which is when what I think you might argue you're talking about started, is we effectively said that we needed to have 34,000 beds ready for NHS, for COVID patients right at the start. And if you remember, we were looking at Lombardy in northern Italy, where people were basically unable to get treated and were effectively couldn't get into a hospital. So we made the decision, not knowing exactly what was going to be coming, to say we had to create 34,000 beds. We did that at incredible pace. Thanks, by the way, to those managers and bureaucrats that you quite often have a bit of a poke at, understandably, but effectively, I do think that was the right decision. In hindsight, we actually didn't need those 34,000 beds, but at the time we had no idea whether we would or wouldn't need them. So,
but we knew within weeks that infection rates had gone down and death and people needing hospitalisation were going down, and at that point we could have restarted that care.
Yeah,
and I'm sorry, we didn't need 2 years to know this.
But Julia, look at January 2021. Without the vaccines, when effectively the NHS came within a hair's breadth of being overwhelmed because we didn't have the vaccines in place, and where actually the virus was so infectious that we were literally having our intensive care operations completely overwhelmed. That could well have happened, and it was a reasonable assumption to make that could have happened back in April and May in the months before. So all I'm saying is, now that you look at it, just as with Omicron, we can now look at it and say it's ended up being rather less of an issue than we thought it might be. But you don't know that at the point when you have to get ready for it. So I would, I think we do need to have a discussion and a debate about this, but I don't think it's as clear cut as you're implying.
All right.
And that's it for this edition of Clashes of the Week. From me, Phil Dave, thank you for the pleasure of your company, and do make sure you stay tuned to the home of common sense. Of course, this is Talk Radio TV.